When my admin, I don't know. I was screaming Godspeed, then Geronimo. Now everything I see is covered in Java codes. Leave it to LC3 to interpret through these hottest lava flows. I'm in Hawaii, back to the 90s.
What's up, man? Pastor Jay here, also known as Jake. That's my actual name, right? Pastor Jay here from Pastor Jay Online, Pastor Jay Media, and now Pastor Jay Podcast. So thankful, man, that you decided to tune in and just see what we got going on today. And I've got my good friend Brad with me. Brad, take a second, introduce yourself, and we're gonna dive in.
Yeah, I'm Brad. I'm a short story writer and a poet, and I'm also soon to be a counseling graduate. I graduate in 2 days, on Saturday.
Yeah. So at the moment we are recording this,
I'm still a student.
he is a college student living the dream. Maybe
Yeah,
not.
if you can
Maybe
say
not.
that.
Maybe so. We'll not say much now because you still got to graduate in 2 days. But in 2 days, this guy will be graduated. So I invited Brad to be on the podcast just to talk. And I've said this if you've watched any of our content before this. I always want to say, man, we're just coming to you not as professionals, but just as people, man. As people living life, certainly in different areas, and we're pursuing things. And Brad mentioned he's an author and he's got some published work, which is pretty great. We'll try to even find a way to link people to that if you want them to be able to read it. It'd be pretty cool. So we do have our own pursuits, but we're not coming to you as, hey, we've got the diagnosis for the problem, or hey, come listen to us for the answers. But it's more of a, here's our experience, here's the viewpoint, the lens that we look at life through, and just to share it and see what somebody might think about it, if it might help change a life or get somebody on a journey. I'm sure you and I can probably tell our stories, and we probably encountered somebody that told some of their story and it interested us to the point where we said, hey, I want to try that, right? I want to go that way. I want to ask that question. I want to do that thing. So got a couple questions I want to ask you, and this will be a conversation, and we'll just kind of see where it goes. It may go totally off script. We'll see. Hopefully not too crazy, but the first thing I want to ask you, you mentioned that you're an author and you're also counseling students. You're going to pursue something in that, I know. So two things there that I'm sure will relate a bit. But I want to ask you first about your writing career. So how does your faith, you are a person of faith, how does your faith impact your writing career?
I think it does that by giving me actual themes to go by. Because one thing, I made a point when I was in art school, because I wasn't always a counseling student. I used to go to art school, and when I was there, I was really opposed to kind of just force feeding like a meaning into something, some really deep, profound philosophical meaning into something.
Okay. Yeah.
And because usually you can tell when someone writes a book to be able to prove a point, you can usually tell, even if it's a work of fiction. Okay. And I always hated that. I always thought it was really annoying and pretentious.
Having an agenda, right?
Yeah. So an example would be Atlas Shrugged, that's basically a 1,000+ page manifesto on this really weird kind of philosophy.
Okay.
And I've always hated stuff like that. There are exceptions, obviously, but as a person of faith, I kind of make the point of not kind of cramming a gospel message into something that's not really about the gospel.
Yeah.
And so, but I'll still use Christian themes of forgiveness or a lot of my stuff takes on a more darker tone. So a lot of it might be about sin and stuff like that.
Well, that's so interesting that you say that, because that's sort of what even. This podcast is going to do a lot. Even the other interviews maybe that you guys might have seen before this, or the podcasts that are to come. That's so interesting because there is a fine line, right? There's this tension between, and I think Christians feel it, people of faith feel it. I think the world feels it, certainly, maybe even more so than we do. But they feel this sort of it's almost like bait and switch. It's sort of this, like you just said, right? If you're going to write that and it's going to be on that topic, then just do that, right?
Yeah.
Don't sneak it in there, but there's the tension, right? But as people of faith, I think as we mature in our faith and we begin to learn more and more about God and Jesus and the things of the Bible, we'll probably begin to see that it does speak in more than we think. So even if we don't intentionally lean in, like you just said, right, there's going to be elements of forgiveness, elements of grace, elements of judgment, right, elements of justice, and all these different things that we may not have even planned to say, all right, I'm going to write this story, and it's going to be about these fictional characters, but I'm going to do my best to talk about Jesus.
Yeah, because because you said that, and it made me think of Tolkien, because like him and C.S. Lewis were like best friends, and so C.S. Lewis obviously wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, which is
Yep.
everybody knows this, especially Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's an allegory for Jesus
Yeah.
and his death and resurrection.
Yep.
But Tolkien, like says he despised allegory, and but we can see stuff in Lord of the Rings that is like somewhat
Yeah.
allegorical to a lot of stuff. Like people will be like, "Oh, the orcs are Nazis," and then they'll be like, "Well, maybe the dwarves are Jews." And I'm like, "Well, that's kind of pushing
Oh,
it."
come on, yeah.
But
Right.
but even with him, like if you ever read the Silmarillion, a lot of it's like
Yeah.
has like parallels to like the creation story and the fall of Satan with
Oh, man,
the fall
yeah.
of Morgoth, and so even if you don't really intend on making something like super allegorical, like your worldview and your experiences and your beliefs will bleed into it in
Oh, that's
one
so
way or
good.
another.
That's what I was just thinking. Like, and yeah, and I guess I would just make the statement. I don't know that we're trying to declare that
Yeah.
one's right or wrong. Right?
Right.
It's just like you're kind of saying, hey,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. I would rather do it this way.
It also
and-
depends on like your personal taste too. Like some people do
Well-
like allegories, some people really don't.
Right, exactly, right. And you're saying that's not really your cup of tea.
Yeah.
But that's so cool. That's so interesting. I'm glad that came out in this conversation. That because I feel that way. That's something that's like a deep passion of mine that I began to learn. I should say I haven't had this passion forever, but that's why I want to have conversations with people like you that are a person of faith, but you are entering into areas and realms that maybe the typical world and worldview doesn't think. Oh, that's a Christian arena, or that's better yet, that's a place that Christians can even reside.
Yeah.
Right? That's more the way to say it. Like when I had LC3 on the podcast, he mentioned that sort of the idea that, hey, I'm a artist, a music artist, right? I'm a rapper, but I don't really want to be like a Christian rapper, right? Like
Yeah.
like why add
like
the
he wants
tag?
to be like a rapper who is Christian.
Well, right, yeah, and I've heard you talk about that before. That you want to be an artist or an author, but not necessarily like labeled as a Christian artist. Not
Yeah,
that you're
yeah, 'cause I feel-
afraid of that, but
Yeah, like I'm not opposed to being a quote unquote Christian writer, but I
Right.
feel like that kind of makes me like it pigeonholes me, and I don't
Yeah.
really like being restricted. Which I feel like LC3 is the same way,
sure, yeah,
because like I already brought up Tolkien, like I more relate to him because he's a author who is Christian, rather as opposed to like C.S. Lewis, who is a Christian author.
yeah, and they both have their place, right?
Yeah.
That's what's great, man. That's what's so cool about having these different pursuits and convictions, and we can have these conversations, which is pretty awesome, right? Like I put out some Twitch content. I like to stream live on Twitch, play video games, and my handle, my tag, just like with the podcast, is Pastor J Online, right? So I want to be known as a pastor that plays games. And so for me, I want to enter into that space, right? And I want to be a part of that. And so sometimes it has its advantages and disadvantages, or even we have personal convictions and we don't. And that's really cool though to hear where you've kind of landed on your spot, And
Yeah.
I know you're young like me, and that may change down the road. But for right now, you know where you're going. That's pretty cool. So, all right, let's move on. So what is one? So we're going to shift gears a little bit out of writing career. This was cool, kind of prepping for this conversation. It was like, hey, what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about writing? Do you want to talk about counseling? Just to see that you've got some pretty significant paths in front of you that you're going to try and go down both, which is cool. But let's talk about counseling. So what's one lesson that your counseling, and I want to be very strategic with the word here, your counseling education, because you are, again, right
Yeah, I'm
now,
still a
you're a
student,
student, right? So we always want to approach this. Again, we're not professionals, man. I'm not, you're not, we're just having a conversation. But what's one lesson that your counseling pursuits, your education that you've received so far, what's one lesson that it's taught you that you think everybody should learn at some point?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I learned that I think everyone else should know is that there's always a reason behind somebody's behavior, whether they know it or not. Like we know the phrase that hurting people hurt people.
Yep.
And so a lot of the time someone might, on the surface, they'll either seem, it could like range from, it could be like, there's a whole spectrum. It can either be someone being like kind of just like a surface level jerk, and all the way to someone being like totally crazy.
Sure. Which is not a clinical term, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, it's not a clinical term. It used to be. Like lunatic used to be an actual.
Did it really?
clinical-
Oh,
yeah.
man, wow. Okay.
But so there's usually a reason behind it. So like,
Sure.
but
no matter where they are on the spectrum of
Right.
intensity, right?
Yeah, and so you might think someone is a, just like you. I'll think of an example. You might see someone, like, on like meme culture. We all know about Karens. Like I work
Oh,
work
sure.
at Starbucks when I'm at home. I know a lot about that.
That's next podcast, guys. No.
But, we look at the surface and be like, oh, these are just a bunch of entitled middle-aged white women. And some of them probably are, yeah. But there's usually also a reason why they might be that miserable. They could be having, like, a bad day. They could have, like, some kind of childhood trauma. Or maybe they had no trauma and they grew up just getting things handed to them.
Sure, yeah.
And then they're just like, and then they think they're entitled to all these favors.
So, yeah, and not to interrupt you here, but just keep this going because that really sparked something. That makes me think. It's almost like for me, just hearing you, this is something I struggle with. Hearing you talk about it, I think that's a helpful lesson to learn because it helps us see past the person's actions, right? It helps us actually see, and this sounds so elementary. I know some people watching this or listening are probably going to be like, well, duh, or they're going to think about it like, you're a pastor, you don't feel, but it's actually challenging, I think, sometimes to see past a person's responses, their actions, their words, what they do, and actually to see that they have a soul, right? To see they have a heart, to see that they have experience, to see that they actually have value, right? And it's not because of how they act, but something is causing that. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Wow, man.
Yeah, and they might not even know what's actually causing it.
Well,
like they might not be like
fair.
Yeah, like
which is where counseling comes in,
right?
Yeah,
like we have one of a mutual friend of ours. Can I say people's names or?
No, I probably would that.
Yeah, it's probably smart. But we have like a mutual friend of ours. He and like to put it as nicely as possible, doesn't always think before he talks.
Oh, sure. Oh, is this one of those moments where it's like, I have a friend?
Yeah.
So you're talking about yourself?
No.
Although we all do that, to be clear.
We all do. Yeah. No, I do this too.
I'm the guy that I never come away from a conversation being like, I wish I would have said. I'm always the guy that was like,
I wish I didn't say that.
I can't believe I said.
Yeah, like I've been I'm not like pointing the finger at this guy because you and I both do it. But
sure.
But like I said, in lack of better terms, he doesn't always think before he talks, and sometimes he has to be let know, be like, hey, this kind of went a little too far.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people aren't always aware of some of the stuff that they do or say.
Well, yeah, and in those moments, right, to your point of what's that lesson people can learn, right? How we all operate, man. There's a litany of things that have led to that point, led to that mentality, led to that action, that reaction. That I was just doing last night. My wife and I was doing premarital counseling with a couple that's getting married in a few weeks, and I love doing those moments. It's so fun just to get and talk about the meaning and different things of marriage and all that, which we don't have time for. But just reminded in those moments, like, when it comes to even marriage relationships, and this would be true any kind of relationship, I think, professional, otherwise, like that's a lot of baggage people are carrying, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that have really, not to play the victim card, I want to be careful there, but we do need to play the reality card that stuff has happened, man, and it's caused us to be that way, and especially intimate relationships. That's where I think counselors, and I would love maybe after you have get some experience under your belt, and I'd love to have you back on the podcast and ask some of these questions again, because it's really interesting from a clinical standpoint. Like, how do you even get past the barrier to get close enough to intimacy so you can get more than the surface answers, right? Because in marriage, there's certainly intimacy there. In friendships, there's intimacy, and you can get past the surface and you can begin to see things and begin to really encounter true heart, soul issues.
Yeah.
And so it's no longer just maybe the Karens at the line at Starbucks. It's somebody that you're living with. It's somebody that you do life with, and you begin to actually see, like, oh, there's a reason that they respond that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's usually a valid reason, too.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
Because I think a mistake a lot of people, not necessarily, I'm not like trying to like point fingers, but kind of just like in general, people will, like this has happened to me before, where someone will have a certain like behavior or whatever, and they're just like immediately invalidated. And I think, especially as a Christian counselor, but kind of like if you're a husband and your wife's doing this, or vice versa, or in any kind of relationship, I think the worst thing you could possibly do is immediately invalidate it. Because I think people should kind of like step back and be like, wait, let's actually think about why they're actually doing this, and not just be like, stop doing this.
Sure. Like, have a conversation, right?
Yeah. Like,
that would go a long way.
Like, imagine what would happen if people actually talked about their problems.
Oh, but it's hard, right? That's what when you first said
because, like,
that.
as men, we're not really...
Oh, okay.
Like we're kind of moving away, like about to move away. I noticed like we're moving away from men trying to be like knuckle dragging tough guys. But I know like for me growing up,
Sure, yeah.
I wasn't really allowed to have feelings because those are like the men in my family were kind of just like, well, grow a backbone and deal with it.
Right,
and,
yeah.
And I learned like as a counseling student, I think that's really a bad way of going about things.
Yeah.
Because like if you kind of just like because like you effectively just like bottle everything up.
Yeah.
And eventually like if you keep filling up a bottle, it's gonna overflow.
That's right. It's good. Yeah. Or explode.
Yeah.
Which is even worse. That's good, man. Well, let's. Gosh, I could keep talking about that forever, but let's not keep going, I guess. So, third question. What at your current stage? So again, we've kind of laid the foundation of where you are, right? You know, college student, and 48 hours, you're not going to be, praise the Lord, right? You know, an author, you got some published work, that kind of thing. So, at this current stage in your life, what do you believe is the most misunderstood thing or aspect of counseling itself?
I would say there's two things. One is that all counselors are kind of like a figurative cure-all. And one thing I was taught almost for like day one is that the referral is, I guess, a counselor's secret weapon.
Okay.
Because like there are some things that I'm not comfortable talking about. Like if I was counseling someone and I'll like talk about myself for a minute. One thing I've always struggled with was talking about like sexual issues.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with that.
Sure.
And if someone comes to me and they're like, especially if it's a woman, a rule I always have is to have another woman present.
Sure.
So it could be like my girlfriend or maybe another female counselor or just someone else I know, like as an accountability thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so one thing I would do, like if a woman specifically, but even like a guy is like, I'm having like this intimate problem with my wife, I might refer them to somebody else who's more qualified than I am.
Yep.
And so I think because of that, that's not utilized enough. And because it's not utilized enough, I think that's kind of something that's misunderstood, is that you can just come to a counselor and then they can just like solve all their problems.
Yeah.
And not always. A lot of times it takes a lot of time. And I think some counselors just want to counselees rather, like patients, clients, they kind of just want to talk about themselves, which does help. That helps a lot of times, but other times they kind of
place for that.
Yeah, there's like a whole school of counseling around, like built up around that.
Sure.
But
I feel that just real quick too, as a pastor, and you're so right, man. You hit the nail on the head. Like as a pastor, oftentimes people, it's very similar, right? People just they'll come to counselors, pastors, different places, and people that provide help and services, which awesome. I'm glad to be a part of that. But they'll come to you, and it's almost like they kind of think, hey, I'll just be in your presence and I'll get healed,
right?
And there's work to be done, and that puts a ton of pressure on the pastor, the counselor, right? Because think about that, like we're literally saying that. With all the issues on that spectrum that you mentioned and all the experiences of life and all people's lives and all that one person, that one set of education, that one set of skills can meet the needs of all that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, right? No other occupation does that.
Like the only counselor that can actually do that was in Isaiah 5:6, I think, was referred to as the wonderful counselor. And,
right?
We're both and I know counselors that I would consider great, but they're not that good.
Yeah, and it's good to stay. That's so good, man. It's good to stay leveled. Realize you can't answer it all.
Yeah.
And to
Like there are some counselors that are devoted to exclusive like two things. Like I know like there's a former student that she was a few years ahead of me that she specialized in crisis counseling and that's it.
Yep.
I don't. But
yeah, right on.
Yeah, but I think a misunderstood thing is that most counselors will usually have a specialty.
Yeah.
So like not everybody is equipped to deal with youth.
Sure. Yep.
Whereas like myself, a lot of I'm not really equipped to deal with a lot of adult problems. So like my specialty was in like youth counseling.
Yep. Okay.
And
you find your gifts and you live in it.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's a big one. I think another big one is that a counselor, rather more, I think more accurately a therapist is all they do is like give medications.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with a freshman about this, is that the only therapists that can give out medications are psychotherapists, and that's very specific.
Yeah.
Like my professor is a therapist, but he's not qualified to like prescribe meds.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of unfair to the rest of counseling, because I think counseling is more than just like giving someone a pill. There are some disorders where they have to be on medications. Like if I'm going to counsel someone with schizophrenia, they have to be on medication, and so they're like grounded and lucid. Because like if you're counseling somebody who's in the middle of an episode, it's not going to happen. Like,
much is
I
going
have to be like
on,
grounded
yeah.
and lucid in order to be able to effectively
Yeah.
communicate.
Well, it kind of relates those two ideas. Sort of the it's. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth by any means. I'm just processing what you're saying. You know, the lesson that you at this point right now for you, the thing that you wish people could learn, if they need to.
Yeah.
You know, not everyone does, but a lot of folks do need to learn this. That the counselor's not a one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
And the counselor, like,
It's not like a pill. It's not like a pharmacy.
well, yeah, because it kind of goes hand in hand, right? Like if we kind of view the counselor or the therapist as like, hey, I'll go there and I'll get prescribed something.
Yeah.
That's sort of the one size fits all, right?
Yeah.
That I can just show up and they'll just right.
Yeah.
But I guess I'll add this is something I've learned as a pastor that like it takes work, right? Again, not just like you don't just sit in proximity with a pastor or a counselor and just by osmosis, you know, you become healed.
Like we can't have like a lost person just be around you and then just like they get saved like that. Like that's just not how it works. You have to actually talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, it took something to get us to the brokenness that we're all in, to be very clear, like that I'm in, that you're in, that's inside of me, that's in the world outside of us. Like it took something to get there, and it takes something to get out, and it's not just being in its presence, right? Or being in like I would believe that really saving hope and freedom comes through trusting Jesus. That's what I believe. You know, and I know you believe that too. But even then, like you can go back and read the Bible. If you're a Bible person, if you read it, if you know it, people were in his proximity all the time, right?
And they rejected him more than they followed him.
Well, yeah, and it didn't just mean they were going to receive healing. However, this was what's really cool, right? There's a story in the Bible where there's a massive crowd, shoulder to shoulder, and there's a lady that for years and years of her life, she had an issue, right? And this is really cool, right? So she was in his proximity, so much so that she touched his robe. And that healed him, right?
Yeah.
So there is some power there. We got to, be careful of, but at the same time.
But she also took the initiative to do it.
Well, right. She wanted it,
Yeah.
right? That was what was so great, and that's pretty powerful, man. That also gives, I think, especially if you're a person of faith, I'm thinking again for myself, not putting words in your mouth, but that brings me a little bit of peace. You know, that I can realize, like when I do sit at a table with somebody, they've brought an issue, a problem, no matter where it is on that spectrum of bad, right? That I can breathe and not feel so much pressure, because coming at the brokenness and the problems that we face as a person of faith, I do believe that there's actually supernatural spiritual power that can free people, and it's not just my words. So like just for you, right? Like you know, like you're beginning to root yourself in the idea that it's not just all of the education, all of the know-how, all of the know-it-all stuff. It's actually there's something that's spiritual at play here that can transform people. And it's not just all me getting it right. And that's freeing, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's so freeing. Like, we can go to bed at night being like, oh, that's not all on me. You know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like the one thing I think about with that is sharing my faith with people.
Yeah.
Because we're commanded to share our faith.
Yep.
We're like obviously like if someone actually gets saved from that, then praise God. But whether that happens, that's on them. Like it. Like,
sure.
like if you if you and I go out and share with people on Main Street, all we're expected to do is just tell them about Jesus, and
contrary,
that's it. Like if they reject it, that's their problem. It's not like it's not like we go to heaven and God doesn't judge us about how many people we led to Christ. He judges us about how many people we shared with.
Yeah, and contrary to popular belief, maybe some people watching. It's not our jobs to walk up and down the street with the largest Bible. I don't have one here. The largest Bible we can find and smack people in the head with it. Right? Like, that's not the job. Right? It's just so cool, man. It's so freeing that we get to. This is what I love about it. So I wanted to actually talk to you and have you on the podcast because you're entering into two environments. And who knows what the next few years of your life, man. You're just not getting started with this stuff. It'll be awesome. But you're entering into some spaces where I feel like God, not just for you, but for me and everybody watching, man, he actually leans in. He wires us a certain way. He gives us passions and gifts, right, to write things and to figure out how to counsel people. And he says, hey, here's a silver platter, and I'm going to give you these gifts and passions, and you get to figure out how to use those to transform people's lives, right? Him doing it through you, which is so cool, right? Like, so when you think about writing, that's why, to me, it's so exciting to hear somebody that enters into the creative world like that, because you get to say, man, I love to do this. I want to get better at it. You know, I'm not the best, but I'm going to try to do my best to get there. And you get to get creative and say, how can I do something here that's going to, because at the end of the day, like you actually you're not just writing stuff for yourself. You're writing things because you want somebody to read it, right? And you want to you want to tell a story.
Yeah.
It could be to bring happiness or joy or to open somebody's mind up to an experience they haven't had. I mean, when I read books, that's one of the greatest things about reading books is you get to experience things through somebody else's words. It's pretty powerful, right? And the Lord just says, "Hey, I'm gonna give you that, and you get to use it, and let's just see what He does with it," right? Which is pretty cool. So, all right, let's just keep moving here. We're almost out of time, I should say, but we still got we're patient. We're all right. But let me do this. This is so cool. This will be another good part, I think, to kind of end. And then we got a lightning round, by the way. Lightning round is my favorite part. Lightning around the questions. We'll see what happens. But what is one thing, and we might have already answered this, and it's okay if we have, you can say that, but what's one thing that you wish Christians / the church, that you wish that they would learn at this moment in history?
One thing that I wish Christians would learn.
Christians or the church, right?
I think one thing would to be in the world but not of the world, which is obviously what the Bible says. But
okay,
in my experience, like at school, like I you know a lot of people from school, from the college I go to, but like we have a whole range of people. We have people like myself who are probably a little bit more worldly than they should be. And then we have other people.
Save the confessional for off camera, man.
And then we have other people that are on like the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where like they're homeschooled their whole lives and they kind of like know nothing about the outside world.
Yeah.
And I think
which isn't all homeschoolers, by the way.
Yeah, not all homeschoolers. a lot do kind of like know like.
Well, but to your point, put it in these words, it's people that maybe just. You said to be in the world, not of it, but there are people that just, quite frankly, aren't in the world.
Yeah,
right?
like they don't really
live.
Like, not to the point where they're like, I'm not saying they have to be like totally vested in like pop culture or anything like that.
Sure.
Rather, they don't really know how the real world works.
Yeah, it would be like this. Let me just this conversational piece right here. It would be like if our church, let's say this weekend we left. And went to a foreign country, went to Africa on a trip, a mission trip of some sort, right? We would need to do our best to figure out what is that place like. I'm going to be living there. How do I engage in that place?
Yeah, like you want to know how the culture works.
Yes, and the world we live in too, right? So that's what we're getting at is like there's some people that live in the culture they're in, and they don't pay attention to it, don't know it, don't learn it. Right, so those people. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I think that would be the one thing I think they should learn is to be in the world enough to where, like, once you actually graduate and come out of your like metaphorical like cocoon or
bubble,
and you're able to actually spread your wings so that
I got you.
Like to think of an example, like if you have someone who grew up kind of like they're weighted like this is not meant to sound condescending, but. Okay. Where they kind of waited on hand and foot, like they never really had to work for a whole lot of stuff, and most people at one point in their life, like they get their first job, start making money, start paying taxes. Eventually, they'll get their own car.
Sure.
A lot of people that I've known didn't have that, and for one reason or another, it's not like one blanket thing.
Sure.
But when they graduate, they usually kind of hit. Like that with and
it's like a train hits you, right?
Yeah, and then they struggle a lot, and that for a lot of stuff. Like when I went to so I went from like an art school to a state university, and then I came to where I'm at now. Yep. But when I was at state university, the university and the art school were run totally differently.
Sure.
And I didn't even consider that when I transferred.
Yeah.
And so it's like I get I've been there too. But I think that's one thing that I think the church should know is that. If you're gonna be in the world, you gotta know how to exist in the world.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, that's really good. And that would actually, if I might be so bold to sort of answer the second question, you can obviously throw in your thoughts. But the follow up question to that is what is something that you wish non-Christians, and I do think, and I honestly hope, man, I really want to, I hope that this is a conversation, this is a platform that the people that don't have faith feel intrigued enough to be a part of, so I hope people are watching that are not Christians, not people of faith. So what is, what's something that you wish people in that sphere of life would learn, and I would love to just kind of, I'll add this quickly, then you can add your thoughts. To me, it would almost be like, I would like to say that I wish non-Christians could learn that Christians and the church have a hard time living in the world, but not being of the world.
Yeah.
So to take that almost as a twofer, right? Like Christians, we wish that Christians, and this is a struggle that you and I will probably have the rest of our life, right? Every Christian should struggle with it. How do we live in a world that, as the Bible would say, if you're a Christian, you know this, the Bible would say that we are in the world, but not of the world. We are in the world, but we are ambassadors of a different world, right? We are actually representatives of a different kingdom, not the earthly kingdom, but a spiritual kingdom, right? So we are literally living in a foreign land, right? So it's going to feel weird, but we still live in it, right? So for Christians, like you just said, right? So for Christians to be like, all right, I'm living here, I'm an ambassador, I am a citizen of a different kingdom, but I still live here, and we need to engage. And then for non-Christians, I would like to just say quickly that I wish that non-Christians could hear that and feel that, and almost to be able to extend some grace, if I can be selfish for a minute, and extend some grace to Christians in the church, and be like, man, they are actually foreigners living in a foreign land, and they have different standards potentially, they have different structure, they have a different dichotomy, they have different values, and that's all just reality. That's not like one's better than the other. I'm not going down that road right now, but it's just we are living differently, right? We have a different culture living in this culture, and that's hard, right? It's just challenging, and Christians... Listen, man, we need to apologize more than we do. I think the world needs more Christians and more churches that are willing to stand up and say, listen, we got that one wrong, but please be gracious, because we are living in a place that's not our home. It's different, right?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to get preachy on you there, but that's just something, like, it's in my heart, man. Like, I would feel that. So what would you say is something that you wish non-Christians could learn at this point in history?
About the church, or just in general?
Just in general, man. It could be like you want them to learn how to play Call of Duty. I don't know.
The one thing I think about is, well, my answer is a little bit more pointed, but
Sure.
In my experience, we've kind of been I think the church has a stereotype, and I think the world is really really apt to accept that stereotype.
Okay.
And I think because of churches like Westboro Baptist, where we think we are like, and it's kind of unfortunate that the churches who have these kinds of voices are often the most loud.
That's right. Yeah. They're given the microphone, right?
Yeah. And well, then I don't want to say they're giving it; they take it.
They
take the microphone.
Yeah. They get it somehow, right?
Yeah, but I think that the churches are not kind of aggressively homophobic. Like, the churches know what's right and wrong. Like you and I both know, like, the biblical standards of marriage. We know the sanctity of life, all that. Like, you and I agree on that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we think that like the LGBTQ community should be rounded up and killed. Like, we know that is not right, because the Bible doesn't say that.
Yeah. Well, because
Paul wrote in Romans, like, he was writing to people who lived that kind of lifestyle. When they got saved, they came out of it.
Sure.
But they didn't do it because they were threatened. Because they were threatened with their lives. They were doing it because God, like, the Holy Spirit worked in them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of goes on, like, with counseling, because, like, I'm just barely finished a issues of human sexuality class, and, like, one thing we were talking about, I talked a lot about gay conversion therapy, and we learned that one is not as, like, when we think of conversion therapy, our first thought is like a Clockwork Orange, where the guy has, like, the things keeping his eyes open, and he's basically being tortured until he changes, like, that's, or brainwashed. That's not how it works. Usually they want to get help. Yeah. And but there's usually a lot of nuances behind stuff like that, and that's a whole separate podcast.
Yeah. Well, no, but that's a really good thing. I think and we got to be careful not to do that right now too. Like, even the questions I'm posing, and as we prepped for this, we try to be clear and be like, all right, we got to be careful not to overgeneralize. But that's sort of what we're saying, right? Is we don't want, the old adage, one bad apple spoils the bunch, and that kind of thing. And I get it, because here's the reality, man. I have perceptions of the world that are not fair. Yeah. We all have that, and it is a fight. We should engage in that fight, not to embrace that, man. Like, even if we're not careful, and we can overanalyze this until it's in the ground, and we can't do that either. But we just got to be so careful and not just take our assumptions, lay them on things that we don't know anything about. We got to be so careful. We do need to be true to our experiences. Like, if we've experienced, like, let's just be honest, if we've experienced a church or a group of Christians, which will be the church, if we've experienced those people and they've hurt us in some way, that's real. That's not like, oh, get over that, right? Like, that's a real thing. That's a part of what you said, the baggage we bring to the table, right? That's something that's happened. We can't avoid that. We can't just sweep it under the rug. You know, the church, Christians, myself, I'm not advocating that we just forget that and move on. We need to address that. But I think we also need to create space where everybody has a chance to apologize. Everyone has a chance to own their mistakes. Like, listen, go throughout history and you can see where Christianity has put the label of Jesus on all kinds of stuff that you and I and almost everyone watching, if not everyone watching, would say was an abomination and should never happen, right? Like, there's so many problems with all of this. And I guess that's what I'm kind of advocating for. And I feel like I hear you saying the same thing. It's like, let's advocate for grace, right? Let's advocate for having a conversation. There's a pastor that I listen to, and I'll say this, and we'll move into the lightning round and get some fun stuff. There's a pastor that I listen to, and he says this. I use this in leadership a lot when I'm leading people. I say you have one of two choices when it comes to how you respond to really anything. Yeah. And I use it in leadership. So, like, being a pastor, something that I have learned that pastors are actually very, very untrusted people. People do not trust pastors. They don't trust pastors the same way they don't trust car salesmen and politicians. Actually, it's pretty crazy, right? The top three least trusted occupations in the country are those three. Yeah. So, being a person that I know people don't trust at times, I want to lean in and just say you have one of two choices, and that is to either trust or to be suspicious. And again, to be clear, like, if we have baggage and experience that leads us to not trust, I get it. But wouldn't it be an amazing world we live in if people could, instead of being so suspicious right off the bat, if we could trust? Because, I mean, man, the relational dynamic is so much healthier, right? If everything that comes your way, man, or my way, if we're suspicious of it, what are they out for, right? What do they want from me? That's a hard way to live, right? So, all right, man, that's so good. Well, let's have some fun as we wrap up here the last just couple of minutes. Lightning round, so it should be a couple of seconds. You ready? Yeah. Pop your neck, get ready, pop your knuckles. Let's do this thing. All right, so 10 questions, lightning round. Just have some fun right here. First thing that comes to mind. Well, as long as you can say it on the podcast. Don't say something you can't. I'll have to edit. No. All right. So if you won $10 million today, what's the first thing you'd buy?
Gas.
Gas.
For what? You need $10 million
for what?
My car.
Your car? Okay. All right. We'll go with it. That's fair.
Mostly because I know I need gas right now. But
that's fair. All right. That's fair. Name one person in your field that you would most like to meet.
Probably, I don't know if I'd want to meet any counselors because I don't, like, this is going to sound weird, but I don't feel like I get anything out of it. Sure, but if I'd meet, like, another writer, a lot of the ones I really want to meet are dead. So my top three are H.P. Lovecraft because I read him, I read him for the first time when I was, like, 12 or 13, and he just, like, changed my life.
That guy would wig me out if I met him.
Oh, me too. Me too. But him, I think Tolkien...
Yep.
And David Foster Wallace, who kind of like he was big on me like later in life. Okay. But I think those three.
All right, right on. So what time of day are you most productive?
Either mid morning or evening.
Mid morning or evening. Okay. Like it. Favorite productivity hack?
Do it.
So you got like Nike all over your wall, right? Just do it, right?
Yeah, I was having a conversation with them. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's good. Yeah, productivity hack. I like it. 3 books that you would suggest.
V for Vendetta by Alan Moore.
Okay.
Lord of the Rings. I consider that one book, even though it's 3 like separate volumes. But
Lord
of the Rings.
Encyclopedia, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know as a Christian, I should say the Bible, but I feel like that's kind of expected of us.
I mean, listen, if it's whatever 3 books.
Yeah, but I think my third book would be, I don't know what my third book would be.
Could be something you just read. What's the latest book you enjoyed?
I just read The Doom That Came to Gotham, which is like Batman but Lovecraftian.
You like it?
I would recommend that.
Let's do it. All right, that's it. That's cool. He shared it with me, and I want to read it. So, all right, 3 movies that you would suggest.
I would recommend the Snyder Cut, the director's cut of the Justice League, even though it's like 4 hours long.
Yep.
I think it redeems the one that they were supposed to make, the one that Joss Whedon was supposed to make. I heard that was supposed to come to be, but it doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Yeah.
It never.
Right.
So
Snyder Cut, Justice
that,
League. Yeah.
I would also recommend the End of the Tour, which is about the end of a book tour. So it takes place in like the 90s. So it's when David Foster Wallace had just come out with his book Infinite Jest. It's like, and it basically defined the 1990s. And it's kind of about the this journalist is hanging out with him and interviewing him basically for the last week of his book tour.
Right.
I'd say that mostly because I'm a fan. But,
sure. All right.
And then my third movie I'd always recommend. I'm a big fan. This is going to sound weird as a Christian, but I'm a big fan of the movie called The Witch.
The Witch.
The Witch.
All right.
Yeah, it takes place. It's basically like a folk horror movie, and this family of pilgrims are lost in the woods. They're terrorized by the titular witch.
Oof. All right. This moment's not for children. No. All right. What would be the title of a book about you if written by your enemy?
I remember you and I were talking about this earlier, and that's hard for me to decide, but I'd probably say Brad Alger, Why Can't You Just Quiet Down?
That is fair.
Because one thing I've heard a lot of people say from you, too, is that I can get loud.
All right. I like it. Brad Alger, Why Can't You Quiet Down? All right. What's one question that you wish I would have asked you?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
It's all right. That maybe means I did my job well. So, how would you have answered that question? You didn't have one. So just last thing, where can listeners find you online?
There's an online journal called agapereview.com.
Yep.
But that's, I think I've had a handful of stuff, like an article, a couple short stories, and some poems. There's like a handful of random stuff published there.
Yeah. Could we link to those in the description of the podcast? That'd be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll send you I'll send you a link to like one of my stuff, but usually like at the bottom of the page, like other stuff will show up there. So.
Right on.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, that's lightning round, man. That was good. That was a 3-minute lightning round. I like it. Almost, right? Okay, cool. Well, again, my name's Jake, also known as Pastor J Online, Pastor J Media at large, and then now Pastor J Podcast. We're just getting going, so I'm thankful that my friend Brad decided to join me. And I hope that this was, I don't know, just interesting, engaging, intriguing, whatever. Again, we're not coming to people with, hey, we got the answers. By any means, we're not professionals. I read a book, or part of a book. I didn't finish it because I'm a terrible person, right? But I read a book by John Piper. Said, brothers, we are not professionals, right? So we're not coming, from a place of, hey, listen to us. But although I will say, man, if you learn something from this, then right on, we've accomplished at least part of the goal. But if nothing else, I hope that you've been interested and intrigued, and you at least want to ask the question, why? That's something that if you haven't heard already on the podcast, you'll hear that's a bit of a theme for us is why. And I think we need to ask questions to find good answers. So thanks for tuning in. That is it for us on this episode, and tune back later for whatever comes next. Thanks.